morning, everyone, or good afternoon to those in Kirksville who are with us right now, virtually, as well as our California counterparts as well. Welcome to everyone joining us today from all of our ATSU campuses. Thank you for taking the time to be a part of this important moment of reflection and learning. Today we gather to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life and work continued to call us toward justice, equity, and service to humanity. Dr. King reminded us that health, dignity, and opportunity are inseparable from social justice, and that lasting change requires both moral courage and collective responsibility. Here at AT-Still University, our mission to serve the whole person and advance health equity, particularly for underserved and marginalized communities, aligns deeply with Dr. King's vision. Today is an opportunity not only to remember his legacy, but to recommit ourselves to carrying his principles forward through education, healthcare, and meaningful community engagement. As we reflect on justice and responsibility, it is also important to acknowledge the land on which we gather. With this, I would like to invite Marlinda Begay to share our land acknowledgement.
Thank you for that introduction, Jordan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being in this space with us today. As Jordan mentioned, my name is Marlinda Begay, and I serve as the coordinator for the National Center for American Indian Health Professions here at ATSU. So I would like to provide a land acknowledgement as well as share a few words, and we'll hand it over to Dr. Andrion. As we reflect on Dr. King's vision, we recognize that the path toward justice has been shaped by many voices. Today, we honor the original stewards of this land, the rich traditions of American Indian nations, and the enduring contributions of Black history. Each are essential to the ongoing pursuit of freedom and equality. In addition to Dr. Andrion's presentation, we hold space in recognition and gratitude, acknowledging that AT-Still University, across its 3 campuses, provides graduate health professions education on the traditional and ancestral lands of indigenous peoples. Here in Mesa, Arizona, these lands are home to the Acoma O'odham and Peeposh Indian communities in the Salt River Valley. In California, the Chumash peoples historically inhabited the coastal regions of present-day Santa Maria. Kirksville, St. Louis, and the surrounding regions in Missouri is located on traditional lands of many native nations, including the Cherokee, Osage, Quapaw Nation, Sioux, Iroquois, and many other stewards of the lands for generations. Our roots and histories are present every day. As we move forward, let us continue to honor the deep history that has shaped our journey and recognizing the cultural significance this land holds for ATSU and the diverse communities we serve. Thank you. Dr. Andrion?
Thank you, Marlinda, for grounding us in reflection and respect as we move forward in today's program. It is now my honor to introduce our featured speaker of the day. Dr. Jeffrey Andrion serves here at AT-Still University as an associate professor in the Department of Physical Therapy, adjunct faculty in the School of Osteopathic Medicine in Arizona, and a scientist with the AT-Still Research Institute. Born and raised in the Philippines and professionally shaped by nearly 3 decades of work in Canada and globally, Dr. Andrion brings extensive experience across clinical practice, teaching, research, and humanitarian service. He holds a PhD in health with a specialization in health equity and policy, an MA in critical disability studies, advanced physical therapy training from institutions in the Philippines and Canada, and a certificate in global health delivery from Harvard University. His work centers on social justice, health equity, and health justice in healthcare, with particular attention to power, privilege, oppression, and labor migration. A nationally and internationally recognized leader and award recipient, Dr. Andrion continues to advance ATSU's mission through innovative teaching and by leading a SANAR project in Yuma, Arizona, which provides rehabilitation services to migrant farm workers and their families. At the conclusion of Dr. Andrion's presentation, we will open the floor to a question and answer session. So please hold all questions until that time. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeffrey Andrion.
Thank you. It's Monday morning, and you just arrived from a wonderful 3-week vacation from one of the 7,000 islands of the Philippines. And Monday morning, you dreaded opening your email, if you're like me. And there it is, 5,379 messages just being away for 3 weeks. And so, without hesitation, you opened it, and there right to the top, sent at 10:51 p.m. from a guy named MLK. And the subject line states, letter for Birmingham jail. Well, who is MLK? What is this all about? But what caught your attention was this one. See attachment. Well, it's only 6 in the morning. Why don't I open this? Which you did. And there it is in Word document. 21 pages, almost 7,000 words. Now, if you are like me at 6 in the morning after a long, wonderful vacation, you mark it as unread. My boss is here, by the way. I don't unread messages. Okay. But what happens when you mark something as unread? Do we just hope that in just 1 week or 2 years, 1 month, something magical will just open up in our calendar and say, well, it's time to read the 21 pages from MLK. As I start this lecture, I want to make 3 land acknowledgments. I am delivering this lecture on land indigenous to nationalities, currently identified as American Indians. ATSU's Mesa campus is near Phoenix, Arizona, and is home to our indigenous to Pima and Maricopa peoples. We honor their sovereign rights. I am also a settler of Toronto, Canada, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I am also born and raised in the Philippines. I am from the southern tip of the country called Davao, 4th generation. Davao is the ancestral lands of various indigenous groups, primarily the Bagobo, Mandaya, and Matigsalug. Again, we honor their sovereign rights. I would like to thank the ATSU Office for Diversity and Inclusion for inviting me to give this lecture. I also want to thank my physical therapy students whose masterpieces you will be seeing all throughout my slides. I also would like to thank the audience both in person and to those joining us online. It's full of love from me. Thank you. I have a confession to make. The moment I received the invitation and accepted it from Dr. Normore, I knew the answer already for this, but I just wanted to consult my friend, Dr. Google. It's my friend. Why should I wear a navy blue suit in a public lecture? There was one important line. It will make you powerful. Because it does. As I reflected on that answer, it also dawned on me that it might be counterintuitive to this talk if I actually made myself powerful. And so I decided to wear the traditional Filipino dress, or Filipino attire. It's called barong. I decided to wear this to honor my ancestors, but at the same time to remind me of who I am as a person. This is my identity. There's a long story to this, but I decided to wear my barong. And so as I give this lecture, this is really an invitation for all of us to have that conversation about the works of MLK. I also invite you to be vulnerable. I teach vulnerability in my course. I am hoping that this will be something that will make you more vulnerable. Now, here's the thing. If you are feeling uncomfortable right now, guess what? You are in the right place. You are definitely in the right place. This lecture is also an opportunity for us to discover or rediscover things that we may have been thinking a lot for a long time. The title of my presentation is The White Coat in Birmingham Jail, The Perils of Waiting. So I'm Jeff Andrion, proudly associated with ATSU and also with the University of Toronto. As I think about this lecture, I also invite you to think about 4 guiding questions. First thing, how did the white coat end up in Birmingham jail? Does that even make sense for you? The second thing is, what is the relevance of the white coat and Birmingham jail in our current system, in our current healthcare system? I also want you to reflect if things have really changed since Dr. Martin Luther King penned the Birmingham jail letter in 1963. Have things really changed or not? And then finally, and most importantly, where do we go from here? What do we do as a university, as a society, as an individual? Now, this might be the best time for you to take a selfie, send it to your boss, and tell your boss that you're stuck with me in the next 45 minutes, okay? As I share with you different stories on this lecture, I also want to offer to you my positionality. So first and foremost, I am a physical therapist. I was trained to become a physical therapist and will always be a physical therapist. And so the idea of a biomedical model is something that pretty much I've been exposed to all throughout my career. I am also what I call a descendant colonizee, 458 years of colonization. So how I think, how I view the world is pretty much shaped by colonialism. I'm a qualitative researcher and I'm also a humanitarian worker. And when I think about my work as a humanitarian worker, which again has shaped who I am as a person in relation to health equity and social justice, it brings me back to my younger days. That's in the Philippines. And at that time, you see here housing the poor. I did not realize at that time that that was called the determinant of health. So I was working for a church NGO in southern Philippines. And I've been blessed in my life to have traveled across the world, including countries in Africa. One of the important legacies, I think, is building this hospital in Malawi when I was the director of international programs from a medium-sized disability organization. And so as I come here today, I bring all of these experiences with me and thinking about how it may have shaped my understanding of the world and of health equity. And my hope is that I am able to pass this on to the students. That's why I teach. Because at one point in time, they would have to travel, and hopefully they've been exposed to these things already. Throughout this lecture, I will be spitting out concepts. For instance, I'm going to talk about a postponed purpose. Okay, it's a term that I've coined. I also want to draw on the work of a person named Arnold Turner on liminality. So again, these terms might be unfamiliar to healthcare professionals. I'm also going to talk about comunitas and collective justice. Now, as mentioned earlier, my training is in the biomedical model, and again, as a physical therapist. But because I've switched to the social sciences, sometimes that journey can be very lonely. And so I've spent pretty much of my career thinking about so many things, including the postponed purpose. And then guess what? Waiting for or praying those long prayers, hoping that I get invited to events like this to share my work. Okay? And that's what Dr. MLK was mentioning when he was in jail. Some of you already know the story here, but it was 1999, 1 year out, post-graduation in the Philippines, and we were working in one of the poorer communities in my city. As part of our work, we were looking to treat patients. Now, because accessing healthcare is very challenging in my home country, finding those patients might also be challenging simply because they don't know what healthcare is, or B, they really cannot afford it. And so one day we found this patient with a spinal cord injury from the waist down with a grade 4 pressure sore that literally you could see the bone moving. Because he was a higher risk for septic shock, so we rushed him to the public hospital. But the moment we arrived in that area, nobody really talked to us. When you work in the field as a humanitarian worker, you should almost always dress like them. You cannot be looking so elegant when you're working with poor communities. It just doesn't count. And so when we arrived at the public hospital, nobody really talked to us. And then I had an idea. I went back to the jeepney, which is our public transportation in the Philippines, took out my white coat, wore it, and the moment I entered the emergency room, people started talking to me simply because I changed how I look through my white coat. We think about white coat as an important event, and it should be. It should be. Here in the university and elsewhere, we do celebrate white coat ceremonies, and those are, by the way, my research students. Because the white coat signals professionalism, we are telling the students that formally we're giving you this professionalism. At the same time, it talks about the ethical responsibility of the healthcare worker, and it establishes and maintains the authority of the white coat, of the wearer. I have listened to many white coat speakers, but there are two important things that have been glaringly absent in those conversations. The idea that, one, it actually grants privilege to the wearer. The mere fact that you're wearing the white coat is a privilege. Could be from your socioeconomic status, could be your education, but most importantly, the white coat bestows power on the individual, whether you like it or not. Just like how I entered that emergency room, there was the power in me simply because I wore the white coat. I've mentioned about the white coat and Birmingham jail. For the purpose of this lecture, let's talk about white coat as symbolizing power and privilege. And let's talk about your Birmingham jail as a postponed purpose. If that sounds too academic for you, let's just think about them as delay, deferral, or even denial. When I think about postponed purpose, to use the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, it is delaying the moral urgency to act. It is also connected with the dangers of waiting. We've seen how waiting killed patients in the ER. I also argue and put forward the idea that health equity should not only be seen as a vital statement found in our documents, but rather it is a vital sign. When we think about postponed purpose, we also think about those social and structural barriers that prevent people from moving forward from a healthcare standpoint. Postponed purpose also talks about the responsibility and the positionality of the healthcare professional. I will mention again later that, again, whether we like it or not, we all have our biases and prejudice. But what we do with those things are the things that would really matter in healthcare. And finally, and most importantly, postponed purpose talks about being too afraid to call out health inequity. Either we are just too afraid, or we were not trained, or we're just following the system. And that's a bigger problem. So this is the framework that I am following as I give this lecture. With health equity in the middle, there's almost like the 4 Ps vying for that thing in the center. And so how did a white coat end up in Birmingham jail? Again, thinking about the white coat as a symbol of power and privilege, and thinking about Birmingham jail as a denial, deferral, a delay. So how did it end up? in Birmingham jail? Well, we'd have to go back to history. We know, for instance, that medicine and healthcare played a huge role in colonialism. As a matter of fact, they've used medicine and religion to grab lands and to kill people. And that's history. We also know about the medical atrocities that were committed during the Holocaust. Terrible, terrible things done to humankind. It also reminds us about the eugenics movement, that we have to normalize society, quote unquote, because anything beyond the normal should be undergoing sterilization. And that was, an example is the Beck versus Bell 1928 case, wherein the Supreme Court actually agreed that they should be sterilized. And we think about Henrietta Lacks, of how her cells have been unethically harvested when she had cancer. And the Tuskegee syphilis study, where black men were denied, thinking about postponed purpose, were denied access to penicillin when it was already readily available. When we think about white coat and health injustices, again, care was delayed, deferred, or denied. We also see a lot of the racialization of disease, that almost always certain diseases were connected to certain races, and as a result, they have been experimented on. We also use the white coat as a weapon, just like how I use it as a weapon in the ER. Colonial power went into those countries and used the white coat to establish authority. There's betrayal of trust, and at the end of the day, there's just so much structural violence in healthcare. And so the question becomes, how have things changed since 1963? Nothing. Really nothing. And very unfortunately, it required a pandemic to remind us that we still have a very, very long way to go. A very, very long way to go. And the sadder part is that everything that we've seen in history has been repeated again in 2020. It's as if nothing was learned by humankind. When we think about health injustices during COVID-19, we think about medical racism and anti-Asian sentiment. And we've also seen a lot of geographical and economic disparities, that there are certain zip codes in certain cities that had more access to the COVID-19 vaccine versus in poorer settings. We've also seen the normalization of at-risk healthcare workers, particularly nurses, who had to work in long-term care facilities or even ICUs because it has been normalized. And as a result, we see a lot of death in those groups. From a global health perspective, we've seen vaccine apartheid. I already received 3 doses, and yet, when I traveled to Africa, they still have to wait for the shipment to arrive. How is that equitable? And finally, there is what we call the determinants of health knot, meaning to say it's one negative determinant overlaid on top of the other. It formed a knot in such a way that it's really so hard to untangle it, and it becomes so complicated and complex, just like in healthcare. Post-COVID-19, it's as if, again, we have not learned anything. We've heard about black mothers who have been refused to be listened to, and they had to deliver their babies outside of hospitals. How is that possible? Or in even rich countries, that people who live in rural areas still do not have access to health care. And so how did the white coat end up in Birmingham jail? How did power and privilege played in delayed or delayed healthcare delivery? It became an accomplice, just like how we saw during the Holocaust years, just like how we did it during the colonial period. And because it became an accomplice, it failed the patient. It perpetuated the status quo. We cannot shake the way things are because it has been working. But the bigger question is, working for whom and why? And it did not only cause harm, it created human suffering, and arguably, it caused death because the white coat became an accomplice in all of these conversations on delayed access to healthcare. We also talk about the normalized assumptions in healthcare, that first and foremost, the medical professional is the expert, hands down. Do whatever you need to do because you are the expert. And that becomes a normalized assumption and even a bigger problem. As mentioned, we cannot shake things up because it's just the way things have been. It's working for some, not for few, but it has been working. So we don't shake things up. The idea that the wearer is not biased at all. Anyone who wears the white coat is not biased. It is a normalized assumption. I teach this course, and I tell my students, leave your bias and prejudices at home because you cannot bring it to the healthcare system. We all have biases and prejudice, but how we react to those things really would matter the most. And then the idea that because I have the white coat, I'm wearing it because I earned it. The idea that it is a privilege. The idea that we tend to forget that there are people who cannot even set their foot in a university because of socioeconomic status. Not everyone can become a physical therapist, unfortunately, or not everyone can be a physician, and that is the reality of life. It is a normalized assumption. I wear the white coat, I am powerful because I deserve it. And so this is what Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about, the nonviolent gadflies. We need to have that tension in order for us to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism. Those gadflies, unfortunately, have been swooped by many, many different things, silenced, because they are annoyance. But we need those nonviolent annoyance in order to move things forward. And so the patterns of tension really in healthcare are many, including anything that's related to healthcare. Almost always it's initiated by healthcare professionals. Again, the idea that there is the racialization of the healthcare experience. We cannot shake things up. It's just the way things are. Or the superiority of Western education and knowledge, which means that we can easily forget traditional healing practices which have been passed on from thousands of years, generation after generation, and yet, as a medical community, we challenge those knowledge which have been created and passed on for thousands of years. And so when I think about delays and denials and deferral, the postponed purpose, there is something distinct about it, particularly that it seems to me that we are jailing ourselves to health inequity and health disparity. We see it, but we don't do anything about it. The idea that we have to jail ourselves to bedside care only, because that's our primarily duty as healthcare professionals, and it should be. However, it leaves us very blindsided of the bigger social factors that influence healthcare, including the determinants of health. Again, I'm going to repeat this, jailing ourselves to the status quo. We cannot shake things up, Jeff. It's just the way things are. We cannot be innovative because it has been working for us. And that becomes a problem when we include marginalized populations into the conversation. And so when I think about the authority of the white coat, we think about the word wait, because for MLK, wait means never. It will never happen. Just wait, it will come to you, but it will not. And so the question becomes, if jails have always been made of steel, if your postponed purpose is the tough structure, it is made of steel, what can we do about it? We have the key, and it's called collective justice. It is a term probably that you might have heard. It's something that probably you might have read. But unfortunately, it is something that has never been sustained in healthcare. When we think about health injustice, where from colonial medicine to post-COVID, we see the role of the white coat as a form of power and privilege. And when we think of the other side, the collective justice, it seems to be so far off. And so we need a bridge so that we can break that steel in the jail. This is where healthcare is right now. I could be wrong, but I feel like we are in this state now. Post-COVID, we have not learned anything. And so this is where I talk about the liminality of healthcare. When we talk about liminality of healthcare, we talk about an in-between state. We are not there yet, and the future is yet to emerge. This is the work of Von Gennep and Turner, but I don't necessarily think this has been applied to healthcare yet. So where do we go from here? Keeping in mind that we have gone a long way as a humanity. From colonial medicine to COVID, nothing was done. And so how do we move forward from that stage where everything was just status quo to something thinking about collective justice? And so when we think about these things, we also think about the word comunitas, which is related to liminality. Compared to community, where there is shared belief, comunitas is the deep human connection. And by comunitas, we think about how do we move things forward as a society. The end goal, obviously, is health equity for all. Recognizing that all of us, regardless of who you are, regardless of your skin color, we all experience some forms of oppression in one way or another. Some may be more for others and less for some. But we all experience oppression in one way or another. And so how can we use that argument to build on the idea of comunitas, the deep human connection, so we can go past the liminal stage and towards the other cliff called collective justice? It is a departure from healthcare initiatives. We have seen that model before. It's not working because it was always healthcare professional-led. Again, comunitas and collective justice should be a sustained effort. It is not a fad, it is not a one-time thing, but it has to be sustained over and over and over. Where we become allies and our patients become our partners. And this is really a great time for us to normalize health justice. And I'm going to repeat that, to normalize health justice in our teaching, in our research, and in our community work. Because at the end of the day, just like how Comunitas is, we are tied in a single garment of destiny. We have no choice. The fear is that it will take another pandemic to remind us that we didn't get the lessons from COVID-19. And so when we think about the single garment of destiny, how familiar are we with the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, particularly SDG number 3, well-being? And so if this is the garment that will bind all of us as humanity, then we should do something about it in our research, in our teaching, and in our service delivery. A single garment as well may look like interprofessional work, which we are all doing already, which is great. How do we sustain that? The other bigger problem is that we are also seeing the re-emergence of diseases, which will ultimately affect all of us. Because I can be in the Philippines in a matter of hours, and I can spread whatever I have, whoever is seated beside me at the airport. We see a lot of re-emergence of diseases, and unfortunately, most of these diseases are found in poorer countries. And what does this mean for our students who would eventually go out to change humanity, I'm hoping? And finally, the idea of health justice, again, as mentioned, for us to continue thinking about this as a framework of how we teach, how we do research, and do community work. Because the time is now, unless we want to wait for another COVID to learn a lesson. The time is now because this wait, again, almost always would mean never. We can no longer wait. The planned purpose, the delay, the deferral, it cannot continue because the model is not working. When you are forever fighting and speaking about marginalized communities, it is hard and difficult to wait because that means more death, more suffering. And so when I think about the dangers of waiting, I know that AI is really, it's really beneficial. It's great. But at the same time, there's the threat of what I call the technologization of the human experience. Feed something to AI, it will tell you who Jeffrey is. That is scary. We cannot wait. We just cannot wait. We have to act now. We also know that climate change has changed a lot of lives, especially in the South. What does that mean for us as a humanity, as the single garment of destiny that MLK was mentioning? I talk a lot in class about neglected tropical diseases. Do we even expose our students to what they are? And why would it matter? My students will be working in Scottsdale. Why would it matter? And that's a question for you to reflect on. We know the effects of wars and famines. Unfortunately, what do we do about it as a single garment of destiny? And migration patterns and aging. And then lastly, the role of traditional and indigenous healing practices. Do we actually expose ourselves and our students to their importance? Do we validate those experiences when they come to us and say, SAGE is helping for us? Would it matter for us as healthcare professionals? And so at the end of the day, what we don't want to be are those structured dams that block the flow of social progress. This is from the letter from Birmingham Jail. We cannot be those dams because we need to change the status quo. It is not working. And so what can we do? First and foremost, we have to acknowledge the lived experiences of our students, our patients, and all those around us, because that's how we learn from them. I also think about critical reflexivity and critical reflection. So these are two different things. When I think about critical reflection, it is understanding your biases and prejudice. But critical reflexivity will go further and ask, how am I influencing the situation as a result of my bias and prejudice? So those are two different things. Again, I keep on repeating about traditional healing practices. And try incorporating research from resource-limited settings. Almost always, our data are from Western knowledge. We have to start thinking about knowledge from the other side of the world. If we truly want to have students who are trained in whole person healthcare. Because guess what? People do migrate. And some of them may end up in Canada or in the United States. Incorporate global health concepts into your teaching if you can, if it's appropriate, just so we expose ourselves and everyone else around us. If you can as well, there's a lot of social theories that will explain the macro forces that influence healthcare. So I've just talked about liminality, but there's 1,000 others that you can start thinking about bridging into your work. I'm going to talk more about the Birmingham Pledge in a short while, and then how do we live the ATSU mission? How do we live and breathe when the moment we step in Mesa? As mentioned, this is an opportune time for us to normalize health justice in our teaching, research, and service. And I would like to share with you how I would do it in my work. So as I move past liminality in my research, for instance, my students from last year went to Japan to present our work on capitalism and physical therapy. That is quite unheard of in our profession, but it is an important topic. Or talking about the impact of post-colonial legacy for those students who have completed their online degrees here at AT-Still. So this is moving, it is an attempt to move past liminality. Or some of the publications, for instance, I am working right now with second-year students on understanding the perspectives of osteopathic medical students on global health. There's no data. And so we're trying to move past liminality. We're talking about migration, which is an important topic. I'd like you to draw your attention in this publication. This is a work related to how students entered a community of Pacific Islanders in their attempt to change their diets. So from a critical theory standpoint, it won't work. And it did not work because we talked about colonization a lot in our paper. And so how do we start thinking about changing our usual approach, the status quo, when we think about projects? I also attempt to liberate myself from my Birmingham jail in teaching, because I do have my Birmingham jail. And I have been affiliated with the university since 2012. And so through the years, I have grown, hopefully I did. And I have come to realize that students bring powerful messages the moment they entered my classroom. One of the things that I co-teach with Dr. Robinson is a course called Psychosocial Aspects of Disability, where I ask students, what is the one social injustice that you would like to address in your lifetime? And almost always, these are the themes that consistently come up year after year. And so the students themselves are trying to move that past that liminal stage to advance our profession. And sometimes you get surprised by how they would like to address the social injustice. 5 students in particular wanted to address the state of refugees. To me, that's very interesting as a physical therapist, because there is hope that somebody else will continue my work. The other thing that I wanted to mention, incidentally, is called the Letters from La Paz, because I teach that course here. And so I aptly called it Letters from La Paz. And the idea behind it is that students will be writing letters to their older selves. Let's say 20 years from now, what would you tell yourself? And so it also gives us a glimpse of the students' insights, their hopes, their dreams. For instance, one student would say, you want to do pro bono work and help those who cannot afford to get the help on their own. That is powerful. When you start thinking about creating my own clinic as a physical therapist, but here is one student saying, I want to do pro bono work. There is one that said, I had the opportunity to incorporate global health into your practice. So again, the idea is them writing a letter to their older self. There's another person who said, I want to embrace diverse methods, including Eastern practices, the whole person healthcare. So they have a lot of lived experience that they bring into the classroom setting. The next one tells us about his identity. Remember what your ultimate goal is: to return to the Navajo Nation and provide PT services to my tribe, because I see how much PT services are needed. Remember where you come from and the social determinants you had to overcome to become a PT. They have used their own lived experience so that they can change the lives of others. They want to move past that liminal stage towards collective justice. Or the idea that I'm excited to know if you held onto your dreams of going on global outreaches and doing them when you had the opportunity. I'm still excited to do outreach for refugees and less fortunate populations in global scale. If you are wondering if a Nobel Prize winner might emerge from AT Steel, here is the data. Okay? I'm a qualitative researcher. Words are my livelihood. So we have some promising contenders for the Nobel Peace Prize. There is hope because we use the lived experience of our students so that we can move forward past liminality. The last thing I wanted to mention is a service project in Yuma. This has not flown out yet, but the idea behind the Sanar Outreach Project is to provide accessible rehabilitation to migrant farm workers and their communities in Yuma. So it received funding from the university last year. Sanar in Spanish means healing. But for this project, that's the acronym, Serving Our Agricultural Neighbors Through Accessible Rehabilitation. We are hoping that this will start in March, cross our fingers. And right now, what we're hearing from our colleagues in Yuma through Sunset Community Health is that there is a huge backlog for patients or children with autism. They just do not have any access to those services in Yuma. And so this is an opportunity for us to work collectively with those patients and communities to say, we can do something about it. So include me in your prayers. When you think about long prayers, include this project. We're hoping to have it starting soon. Health justice work is hard work, admittedly. But the biggest problem is when we try to do the right deed for the wrong reason, when we lose that authenticity to truly help people. That is the biggest reason. So where do we go from our individual Birmingham jail? If there's something right now that you've always wanted to do, but you kept on delaying it, you kept on waiting, then guess what? That is your Birmingham jail. What MLK is telling us is that you need that Birmingham jail because it means life led you to it. There is an injustice in your Birmingham jail that you need to address, whatever it is. And so I would invite you to keep on reflecting on what your Birmingham jail truly is. Something, like a small voice always following you, telling you to do something, and yet you just keep on waiting and waiting or delaying, hoping that something magical will happen. As an institution that bestows the white coat, how do we continue to live our mission and focusing on whole person healthcare and serving the underserved populations if we, as an institution, also have our collective Birmingham jail? I don't know the answer, but it's a question that we have to continue reflecting as an organization. This is the Birmingham Pledge that some medical students or institutions use in their white coat ceremony. And so there is an opportunity for us, in one way or another, to somehow incorporate this, because the last thing is the most important here. I will strive daily to honor this pledge, knowing that the world will be a better place because of my effort. I am stepping out of that liminality towards collective justice simply because I did something. I refuse to follow the status quo. And MLK reminded us, they have acted in the faith that right defeated is stronger than evil triumphant, because health justice is not an easy work. So, it's Monday morning. You've read your email. Will you still mark it as unread? Thank you. That is my email address if you want to connect with me or whatnot. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andrion, for that thoughtful and impactful presentation. Let's go ahead and give him one more round of applause. All right, we will now go ahead and move into our Q&A session. So if you have a question, I will definitely be your talk show host and walk around with the mic, so that way everyone can hear it. Clarissa, if there's anyone online asking a question, let me know. Anyone? Thank you, Dr. Allgood.
Thanks, Dr. Andrion. That was great. So you encouraged your audience to look for steps that they can take, in particular in their work at ATSU as educators or supporters or anyone who is interacting with students, which is everyone. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of folks, including myself, feel like I don't have the skills and I don't have the knowledge and I don't have the expertise to embark on a research project like that or incorporate that into my into the curriculum that I'm part of. So how would you encourage people to do that if they feel like that's not my space?
Thank you for that question. And again, this is related to our own bias and prejudice, our own identity. There is a saying in the critical disability world, nothing about us without us. Meaning to say, you cannot talk about something if you really do not have the lived. I cannot talk about the black experience because I am not black. And so to answer the question, I want to mention that, for instance, when we start thinking about the health of American Indian, we do have an office within the universities. That's a great resource. The other thing is probably to scout around in terms of who does what. And I know that's a bit trickier in terms of different research interests. So that would be my take. But absolutely, if you want to do something and yet you feel like you cannot go past the liminal stage, that becomes your Birmingham jail. And in order for you to get out of that Birmingham jail, you need the resources. So again, we have in-house centers within the university, but most importantly, we do have colleagues who are in one way or another are doing some kind of work. And it won't hurt to reach out as well to other universities because they have different expertise, especially for public universities. Did I answer your question? Okay, welcome. This feels like a dissertation defense.
Dr. Andrion, thank you very much for a stimulating challenge. You mentioned at the start that there are sources of power. And in this case, there are many sources of power, one of which is a white coat. The other one is money. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you've thought about the financial implications of what has to happen and the implications of what that could cost and where the funds come from.
So that's a great question. One of the things that I try to share to my students is how capitalism has influenced healthcare a lot, especially in the United States. Unless students understand why they have to pay certain things, then I don't think they will understand the bigger social forces that influence their practice. That why a patient cannot have access for rehabilitation because they cannot afford it. We are not attempting to change the system because we just can't. It's a giant. but knowledge is power. And so my hope is that some of my students would eventually address this by doing pro bono work or doing things on the side. Because at the end of the day, capitalism controls everything, our economy, our healthcare. And so for me as an educator, it is so much about informing and educating my students about the impact of neoliberal practices or capitalism and how that influences their practice and healthcare in general. I am not sure if I answered your question, but it's more of a theoretical side. We cannot really at this point change the system. There's just no way we can. But what we can do right now is to educate our students with the hope that at one point things will change. That healthcare would, as a matter of fact, become a basic human right that everyone just goes past the liminal stage. And that's hard. I come from a public healthcare system, obviously in Canada. It's not perfect either. It's not perfect either because absolutely it's correct. Money influences everything in healthcare. If you do not have the funds, you cannot have access. And so this might actually be a good opportunity for us to talk to our legislators. How can we continue moving forward the idea that health should be perceived as a human right versus as a commodity? Because those are two different things. Yep. Did I pass the dissertation?
Alrighty. Thank you very much, everyone, for those shared questions and reflections. To close out our program today, I would like to go ahead and invite Dr. Clinton Normore up to go ahead and give us a closing remark.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let's give Jordan Jackson a round of applause for putting all this together. I want to thank her, the rest of our diversity team, Marlinda, Clarissa, Stephanie, for the work that they do. None of this is possible without courageous leadership. I say this often. He doesn't like it, but we are so fortunate to have a chancellor, Dr. Phelps, who has been courageous in his career in living the mission that Dr. Andrion spoke of, which is why we're here today. So thanks to him, thanks to Dr. Wendell, our campus president, thanks to our board of trustees, thanks to communications and marketing, Sean and his team, our IT team, Brian, for all of the collective work. Equally, probably more so, thank you for you all being here in this space. Our deans, cabinet members, our department chairs, our faculty staff, our students, human resources, and most of all, thank you, Dr. Andrion, for that riveting message. My greatest takeaway from that message is how you correlated the white coat with nonviolence, you know, the power of privilege, which is you and I equally work in that space, and the nonviolence a movement that can be cultivated through the power of the white coat. That's what I took away. I took away the Birmingham jail analogy, us being jailed by our own fears. Peter Gruber described that as false expectations appearing real. And you said this also, and it really is true for ATSU over its 100 and almost 40-year history. Its mission is serving underserved populations, and we have uniquely in this space graduated thousands, hundreds of thousands of students who do that very thing. And that is the position on which our communities can be that change in healthcare that's needed, a nonviolent movement in serving underserved populations. Because quite honestly, and I've only been in higher education almost 30 years, but in the health education perspective, 13. I've learned that often universities speak about their mission of serving underserved populations and wanting to lean that way. But not many of them live it through the experiences and really the work that they do internally and the reach that they have relative to the students that they graduate. ATSU does, and that puts us in a very unique position, a powerful position, and I appreciate that fact. We all chose to be here, right? Students, faculty, staff, with the understanding that we have a very, very unique mission of service. And we accept that as a badge, as a privilege, also as a power. Then I think about this space, again, the courageous leadership we have to adopt this model of cultural proficiency. The believing of being able to interact effectively in every cultural setting. And it relies wholly on your approach, being willing to recognize that jail and get out of that jail so that you can meet people where they are. And we do that uniquely at ATSU University with folks like you, talent like you, our deans, our chairs, our faculty, our students. So my closing remark is that we continue to do that work. The work that we do in serving our mission is a nonviolent approach to changing a system. And I do think that transformational change is possible. I think it takes a very, very long time. I know it takes a very long time, and it requires working both inside and outside of the system to get it done. Same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. For us, it's been decades, and it will continue to be that way. But as long as we stay true to our work, stay true to our mission, reflect on our biases and how they might interfere with that work, and mitigate those differences that keep us from falling victim to the Birmingham jail, can we only see those results. And it might not be our generation, but I believe, as many of you do, that somewhere, at some point, this society will truly value opportunity and access, especially to healthcare. So thank you for those remarks. Thank you to the team. Thank you to all. There's still plenty of peace over there. Please, please, please enjoy the pizza. Thank you, Dr. Phelps and Cindy Kay. We look forward to being with you and amongst you throughout this journey. If there's anything that we can do to be helpful, please do not hesitate to reach out to the diversity office. Thank you.